Hello and welcome to this webinar from PNMsoft, using IT as an enabler to support changing business processes and requirements. I'm James Lussard. I'm Global Head of Product at PNMsoft, and I'll be walking you through today's webinar. So, fundamental part of today's webinar is all about change. Change means lots of different things to lots of different people, and change can be interpreted in different ways by different people. So it's very important that everyone from the business through to IT understand exactly what we mean by change. Change needs to be very clear what people need. Different terminology, different types of language can result in different people meaning different things, interpreting change in a different way. So part of what we're doing today is just looking at how can we make sure that everyone understands exactly what is being requested, what is meant. So the change challenge. It's not a new problem. Organisations have always required the ability to be able to adapt to changing situations, whether they're economic, technological or competitive. The marketplace that they're in is changing. And this means that the organisations need to undergo near constant change, and not only to their business but specifically to their business processes, the way the businesses work. And today, IT is becoming more and more involved in the way that businesses work. Therefore, it's key that change within these underlying business systems, specifically business process applications, is carefully controlled and managed. But the problem that we have here is the business needs to be able to change quickly, to have agility, to be able to adapt to those changing needs very quickly. But IT needs to have control over this, make sure that any changes are well tested, well developed and released into production environments in a well controlled way. So today we'll be talking a lot about not only allowing business to be able to make those changes, but to give IT the confidence to allow these changes to happen, but still within a well governed environment. So how can we achieve this for IT? How can we allow IT and process professionals that are introducing changes to business processes to balance these conflicting demands? And just as importantly, which technologies are available to IT to allow them to become change enablers, to really allow them to move from potentially blocking change to really driving change forward. So, change, it's not a new problem, but it is a big pain, a very big pain for IT. So we need to really explore how can IT transform this big pain into a real achievement, something where they're seen in the business as someone, as a team, as a department, helping to drive the business forward. So today we're going to discuss just 5 of the ways that we can help transform IT's biggest pain into its biggest achievement. We're going to look at collaboration during change. How can IT and the business work together to make sure change is introduced quickly, efficiently, but also effectively? We're also going to look at transforming existing skills, specifically .NET skills, into BPM Expertise. How can we take that valuable resource that's already in your organization and use it in a new but valuable way? And in today's ever more mobile environment where people are working in not just the office but all over the place, at home, out in the field, out on the roads visiting customers, how can we help to make those people work more effectively in that environment? How can we make your applications more mobile? And Microsoft applications, more and more organizations are using CRM, SharePoint, AX, the Dynamics Suite, other Microsoft technologies within the organization. But today we're going to discuss how can we help IT to extend those applications with BPM, with Business Process Management. And finally we look at, well, how can we deliver controlled change? It's all very well introducing change for the business, but it must be controlled. Okay, so we're going to start off by having a look at collaboration during change. We're going to look at how we can collaborate between IT and non-IT, so the business has the requirements. How can IT work with the business to make sure that the change is implemented quickly, correctly, and on time? So we're going to discuss 6 key steps here. This is really key in change, specifically in process changes. So we're going to discuss how we can capture the change, how the business can describe to IT exactly what they want and agree the change. IT understands exactly what is required and can play back to the business their understanding and a correct understanding. The 2 stakeholders can then categorize and prioritize the change so that everyone understands when the change needs to be implemented, what impact it's going to have on the business, what value it's going to have to the business. Implementing the change, getting the change into the systems as quickly as possible, but then allowing the business to review the change to make sure that what IT have implemented is exactly what they need. And once the business is happy, then we can deploy the change. Okay, so I'm now going to show you how IT and the business can collaborate together using PNMsoft Sequence. Sequence is our business process management suite used by many customers to automate their business processes. But today I'm going to show you how the same technology can be used to help to manage the change within those business processes. So I'm going to show you a little demonstration here. I'm going to start off in Sequence in our FlowTime portal. I'm a business user and I want to request a change to my service request process that I own. And within Sequence we can start processes with a simple click of an icon that will start a web form that will then allow me to be able to start the process. In this case, what I want to do is actually submit a change request. It's a very simple process, but just showing some of the concepts that are available using Sequence. So on this form I'm going to give as many details as I can about the change that I'm requesting, including when do I actually require my change. I need it by the 22nd of October. Which process does it relate to? It relates to my service request process. How do I perceive the priority? I believe this is a medium priority change. And what is the change? We're going to look at changing the SLA, the service level agreement to which the service request process runs, the time taken to action the requests. So I give it a title, but then I give it a full description. Please. Oops. Duration from 4 hours. We want to reduce the SLA time down to 2 hours. Reasoning. Again, now if you were to use Sequence in this, you could add as much information, gathering as many items of information from the customer to make sure that as IT you understand exactly what the customer means. So the reasoning: we need to be more responsive to our customers. So I can then submit my change request, and this will now be passed on to IT. In this case, we're sending it to our change control board, who each individual on that can take requests, can examine those requests, can evaluate those requests. So I've submitted my change request. I just now need to wait for IT to come back to me. So I'm now going to switch to a different browser. I'm now going to switch in as Mark. Mark works for our control change board, and in his inbox he receives notification that he has a task to do, and he can open that task and he can have a look at it. He can do an initial assessment, check whether he's happy to take this. Yes, he is. So he's going to take ownership of the task. Now that he's got ownership, he can evaluate the task. So it's the service request process that we're looking at. And I can see, yes, James wants to change the SLA from 4 hours down to 2 hours. Okay, so let's have a little look at the actual process so I can try and understand what is meant. So Mark opens up the particular workflow. Here we are in the Sequence App Studio, the studio where we design and build our processes. And Mark can see here, oh, so we can see we've got 3 SLAs here. Okay, so we can look at each of these in turn. Very quickly I can explore the conditions behind here. So we've got one SLA here that's 4 hours monitoring the process request step. Okay. This one here, what are we measuring? 4 hours for the review request step. Okay. Now I'm getting a little confused. And what's this third one? Okay, another SLA for the action request step. I'm not sure which one James is referring to. So I need to speak to James and find out, get a little bit of clarification before I submit this. So what I can do, within the step here, I could phone James up, I could send him an email, but if I do that, the people working on this later on will lose the context of that conversation. So I'm going to use one of Sequence's social BPM features, the process wall, to have that conversation. I'm going to ask a question. This allows Mark to be able to ask a question of anyone working in the process or actually anyone else within the organization. But in this case, I want to ask the question back of James. So I find the appropriate user. Here he is. I add him to my list. Oops. So change request query. Hi James. And say there are 3 SLAs in your, can't type very well today, in your process. Which one do you mean? Thanks, Mark. Nope, sorry, I'm James. Thanks, Mark. And I can send this question to James. So let's now switch back to me. And if I now go to my inbox, I'll see I've now received a query from Mark Brown. Let's have a look. Okay. I better action this. It's obviously asking me a question. Okay. Yes, so there are 3 SLAs in the process. Which ones am I talking about? So I, as the business user, can have access to exactly the same process. So I can come and have a look at it as well. I can log on and I can have a look, see, okay, yes, I see we've got 3. I'm actually talking about this one. This is the one that I mean. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply a comment to the diagram. A little annotation. This is the SLA that needs changing. So I can make that change. And I can reply back to Mark. I've marked the process with the SLA I need changing. Is the action request SLA. And I can send that back to Mark. If Mark now checks his questions, he's got the answer. And all these notifications can be going backwards and forwards via email as well as through the portal. So very easy for people to understand when they're being asked questions. But this will be made available to everyone. Everyone can see this. So Mark can now go ahead and fill in. But there's perhaps some other information that he wants to validate, such as the actual date required. So he may arrange a meeting. He may ask more questions. Let's assume he's now said to James, okay, let's sit down and just discuss this via an online session. And between them they can agree, okay, we don't actually need it on the 22nd. We're quite happy for it to be the 29th. But we want to categorize the change. This is a minor enhancement. And it's of medium priority. We believe the impact will be low. It's a fairly small change. But how do we want to apply this? With Sequence, we can apply changes as a new version of the process. All existing processes will carry on with the old version. All new instances will adopt the new version. We may want to apply it as a hotfix. Any in-flight processes, we want to apply these changes to those in-flight processes. We can do this with Sequence as part of its HotChange capabilities. So we're going to apply this as a hotfix. We're all clear on this. We're happy to approve. And we can now schedule this change to a specific change drop. And we can click submit. We then send notification back to the originator to say this change will be done on so-and-so date. So everyone knows exactly what to expect of their change requests. Okay, we're now going to go back in as Mark, as IT management. And we're going to have a look. In fact, I'll do it as myself. I'm going to actually implement the process as James. We can have a look at the list of changes that have been submitted. Another process in Sequence. Here we have a set of filters that allow me to search for all the change requests that have been applied. And here's the one down at the bottom. If we've got many change requests going through the system, this sort of capability allows us to find exactly what we want. We can filter on a specific drop. We can filter by a specific process if we wish. By the type, by the originator, the evaluator for instance. So let's say we want to group it by evaluator. We can just select from our little menu and that will group them for me by James and by Mark. It means that IT can manage very easily within the same product as the product that they're trying to manage all of the change that relates to that process. So Mark now wants to implement that change. Let's just have a little look at just how easy implementing change is. That fifth step in the process. We go into the App Studio. We can see the comment is clear here. We're applying this as a hotfix, so I'm not going to create a new version of the process. I'm going to make the change directly to this version of the process. We're on the demonstration, on the development environment, so we won't be making this to the live production environment. Of course, IT want to control the release of this, but first of all, we need to make the change. So I'm going to edit this particular activity. Now here we can see how we can collaborate even when we're building the process by having multiple people doing tasks, actioning change on the process by using source control. So I need to check out the activity before I can work on it, which means other people can be working on other activities. I can focus on this and make the changes, knowing no one else is going to be making changes to this particular process, this particular activity, sorry. I'll edit the business rule that's defining how many hours this SLA requires. And here, using Simple Wizard, I can quickly drop it from 4 hours down to 2 hours. That's the change done. Very quickly done. And Mark may decide, okay, I'm now going to go back and have a look. He can see here that he's had the answer to his question back earlier. But what we can also do we can come in and we could add comments just to say this could of course be including part of the process, but what we're just trying to show here is within human-centric processes, people need to speak to each other, collaborate with each other in ways that you can't necessarily predict when you're building the process. If you try and build those sort of interactions into the process, you'll have an unwieldy process as a result, and you can never foresee every possible human interaction. So the use of Sequence's process wall allows those interactions to happen very easily. The change has been actioned. And then anyone coming in here can see that this change has been actioned. Okay. So let's just recap here. We've looked at how we can capture the change. The business user filled in the details of the form. I kept it fairly brief here for the purposes of the demonstration. Of course, in real life you may want to have a more comprehensive form. IT could review that change and look at it, and if they had any questions, using social BPM capabilities, using the sequence process wall, they could have an interaction back with the requester. So we could get it very clear idea of exactly what's required by the business. IT then worked with the business to categorize the change, decide what sort of change it is, how important is it, when are we actually going to apply it. IT then quickly made the change. One of the beauties about Sequence is you can make those changes very quickly. It's not a lengthy development cycle. The business user then reviewed the change, and later on, we haven't done that yet, we'll show it later, we can then deploy the change from the development environment to the production environment. So here we've had a little look at how IT and business can collaborate together through change. It's very important that it's a partnership. The two sides work together, get that change clarified up front, but all the way through the business is involved in defining exactly what they want, and IT making sure that if there's any questions that they go back and get answers to those questions. So that's the first way, collaboration during change. So let's move on now. Let's have a look at transforming existing skills into BPM expertise. So here we're going to have a look at how your IT organization can take that skill set already existing there and transform them into BPM expertise. So first of all, let's have a look at a profile of an excellent .NET developer. Just a few of the highlights. They clearly need to have excellent skills. They need to be able to speak to the business, to understand what the business is after, and to translate those requirements into technical solutions. They need to be able to collaborate with the business in making sure that the solutions that are going to be delivered are exactly what the business needs. Ideally, that excellent .NET developer will have an interest in solving business problems with technology, not for using technology for technology's sake. But of course, always need to be keen to keep abreast of new technologies as they become available. And finally, it's not just about one particular technology. Organizations need to make use of multiple technologies, whether that's different platforms, different infrastructure technologies, different enterprise systems, whatever it may be. It's about bringing different technologies together to solve the business problems for for the business. Okay, so that's just 6 bullet points about an excellent .NET developer. So what about an excellent BPM expert? Now, historically, these have been different people. They've been viewed as more sort of business analyst type of people. But what in today's world do we think a BPM expert needs? Now, they really need to understand technology and have excellent technical skills. They need to be able to take business requirements and understand how they can be mapped onto business processes to provide a technical solution that is exactly what the business needs. They need to make sure that that solution, that automated process, exactly meets what the business requirement is requiring. So they need to work with the business in order to achieve that. And they need to understand that the fundamentals of automating business processes is about technology. So they need to understand, as new technologies become available to the organization, they need to understand how they can be used as part of a BPM environment. And of course, bringing all these different technologies together, it helps if they have an interest in many different types of technology. Okay, so what's the difference between that .NET developer and a BPM expert? It's the same 6 bullet points for both. Obviously a slightly different slant on them, but someone who's an excellent .NET developer can very quickly become an excellent BPM expert, specifically an excellent sequence expert. Sequence allows .NET developers to transform into BPM experts very easily. So now I just want to perhaps give you a flavour for, well, how can a .NET developer use a BPM solution? Let's give you some ideas how that can be achieved. I'm going to show you the Sequence UX Studio. So here we're back in our process, our service request process, and I'm going to have a look at this first step in the process. This is a human-centric process, and it's kicked off by someone in the call center submitting a form. So let's have a look at that form that they fill in. Again, I need to check it out. So here we are in the Sequence UX Studio. Now here, this is a web form that I've obviously already built this. We don't have time today really to build anything from scratch. but I'm going to show you some of the capabilities of this UX Studio. It all starts with the data model. Underpinning the form is data. And here I have a number of different areas. I've got the service request. This is the actual table where we're going to store the data that the user types into the form. And this is a very easy little wizard where I can just manage the fields that are going to be on my form. We can see all of the fields that we have here. We can add new fields, we can change the fields, manage it all in one place. But in addition, I've got some lookup tables as well. On this form, we're showing information from an external CRM system. We're showing lists of customers, the contracts that relate to those customers, and also the contacts that relate to those customers, but also showing details about the customer, about the contract, about the contact. I probably won't have time to show you this today, but it's just one of the ways that with sequence forms we can pull information out from external sources, either external tables in another database that we connect to via an ODBC connection. We may want to run a store procedure against our database. We may want to run SQL queries, or we may want to call services, either Windows services or web services, to reach out to external systems to pull back the information that we're going to display on our forms. So once we have our data model where our data is going to be retrieved from but also stored, that's when we can start building our forms. And each control that we put on our form from our comprehensive palette of controls, we just link to a field in our data model. Very easy to do, very easy to add fields. So as the business has more requirements for change, you can easily add those to our forms. But here, this topic that we're talking about at the moment is about .NET developers. How can we use our .NET development skills? Well, down here I'm actually looking at the graphical view, but I can split to the source view. What we are creating here is a .NET form with all the power that ASP.NET gives to us to provide rich, powerful, dynamic but simple to use forms. I can design my forms in the graphical view. I can design my forms in the markup view, however I feel most comfortable. I can combine the sequence controls with the standard ASP controls. I can even, if I wish, create some code behind for even more dynamic behavior to my forms. I have here, this is a set of .NET controls. But of course we've got all the validation controls as well. We can create panels, we can create forms, grids, data sources, all the things that .NET developers will be familiar with, will be comfortable with, will be able to create forms very quickly with. And because they're .NET forms, you can add your own controls and the resulting forms will be very powerful, will perform very well, and will be tightly integrated with the sequence process. So here we're not combining a form technology with a workflow engine. The two are part of one and the same. So the benefits here of using a .NET BPM solution such as Sequence is you can use those skills you already got. People will be familiar with what's, with the fundamental workings of the product. We have SQL Server at the back end, so people know how to create databases, how to write stored procedures and so on. I'm a developer. What's in it for me? Why shouldn't I go and write code from scratch, write lots of lines of C#? A lot, probably a good 50–75% of software development involves repetitive stuff, doing the same old stuff, such as creating the database, connectivities to the database. How do I manage the data in the database? How do I manage my users? How do I allow them to administer the application? By using Sequence, it allows you to be able to not have to do, Sequence does all that stuff for free. You don't need to do it each time you're building a process application, which gives you more time to do some of the more interesting work, creating a really rich user experience, understanding the business logic, being able to create the process flow exactly how the business needs it, being able to do some of the complex integration, being able to call web services and so on to be able to do integration to external systems. But of course, your Microsoft skills aren't going to fade away into the background. You'll still be using those Microsoft skills. SQL Server, .NET, SharePoint, Windows Communication Foundation, Windows servers, Dynamics CRM, and so on. You'll still be able to include those in your Sequence project when you're automating your business processes. You'll still be developing those skills. As new Microsoft technologies come out, you'll be able to learn those and utilize those as well. But really, you'll just be able to do the more exciting stuff, the more repetitive, mundane stuff. Sequence will take care of for you. So there's just a few ways about how having a .NET skill set allows you to use a .NET-based BPM product, allows you to use those one set of people to be able to do both. So we've talked a lot about actually building the applications. And I mentioned at the start, applications. We've seen some web forms ideally suited for use on either laptops or desktops. But people aren't working that way anymore. People are tending to be out and about, want to be more mobile. We need a BPM solution that allows us to very quickly be able to create a solution that we can deliver to the business, that we're not having to write a specific application for the mobile. How can we do this? Again, I'm going to go back via our App Studio into the UX Studio. And here we are. I showed you the form editor earlier here. And this is the view that's very oriented towards seeing it on a wide screen on either a laptop or a desktop. But if I'm on a mobile device, there's too much information on here. There's no way that I can realistically view this form on a mobile device. So historically, I'd have had to perhaps build a separate application that I'd have integrated into my BPM application. But not any longer. Because we have the underlying data model, with Sequence Kinetics, we can now create specific views for specific devices. The first view I showed you was for the laptop stroke desktop. Here we're seeing the view that I can create sitting on top of the same data model but tailored specifically for the mobile device, showing much less information. We may collect less information from the user, present them with less information, have slightly different validation and so on. But what it means is the user can have an experience tailored to their specific device that they're on. And just to give you a flavor of what this may look like, how this translates, let me take you into the PNMsoft mobile portal. I'm going to log on. And this form that we're looking at, I can access. Let me scroll down and I can start at the click of a button this particular process. And here I'm on the mobile. This is the view that I see. If I start exactly the same process when I'm on my laptop, I get the other view. So very easily I've been able to create views specific for the actual device. And this is, it's a very quick job to be able to create these forms using the graphical editor. So yes, so there is just a little taster. Didn't really want to focus too much on this. I didn't want to have to start building web forms because we've only got a short space of time. But what I really wanted to show you was with Sequence Kinetics, it's very easy to be able to add mobile flavor to your business process applications. So, is your user community becoming more mobile? Do they want to be able to action tasks wherever they are and however they want? How can we achieve this quickly and easily? A product such as Sequence Kinetics really enables you to empower your mobile workforce. So we've had a little look at how we can transform our business process applications into mobile applications without rewriting them. Sequence Kinetics comes with the mobile portal. Users can access that very easy from their smartphone. We have other capabilities such as our one-click emails that allows mobile users on their smartphones to quickly be able to action tasks and so on. But if they're in the office and they want to work in a desktop environment, they can do that for free. They don't need to do one or the other. They can work in the way that suits them most. So moving on to talk now a little bit about Microsoft applications. Let's look at ways that we can extend the comprehensive suite of Microsoft enterprise solutions. So, first of all, we need to talk about the change conundrum. Do I customize my application, or do I implement the change using BPM? Let's perhaps discuss these 2 points. So, when should I customize my application? Perhaps if the users for that extended functionality are core users, then yes, it makes sense to customize the application. Perhaps the data involved is core data, data that is fundamental to just that application, doesn't reach out into anywhere else in the enterprise. And if the functionality is contained wholly within the scope of that application, perhaps then yes, you should customize the application. But conversely, when should we implement the change using BPM? So if more users are involved than those core users, people that perhaps don't know the application inside out, don't use it day in, day out, that may struggle a bit with using it, wouldn't be an efficient use of their time. There's external data, data held in perhaps other systems, in other databases, in other data sources. And perhaps the functionality extends beyond the scope of the application. Applications, enterprise systems, they're intended for a specific purpose. If the functionality is outside of that specific purpose, then you can start stretching that application, and it can then start getting unwieldy, unmanageable. So let's look at this graphically. We have data, we have non-core data, and we have core data. We have non-core functionality and user interface, the way that people interact with systems. We have enterprise-wide processes, and we have processes within an application. We have non-core users, and we have core users. If a change is fundamentally below the blue line, then perhaps you want to look at implementing that change within your application as a customization. But if any of those elements are above the blue line, then there's a very good case for implementing that change within BPM. So let's look at just 3 examples to see how this may work. The first one is CRM and bid management. An example process could be the creation of a proposal. And here we're talking about fairly complex proposals. An organization may need input from project management, from resource management, from technical architects. This is a technical proposal for a technology company. We may need costing data from the ERP system. We may need account data from finance. And we'll almost certainly need senior management approval. So looking back at our items, we've certainly got some non-core data there from the ERP, from the account finance system. It's an enterprise-wide process because it not only touches the sales team, but it reaches out to the delivery arm of the organization as well. And non-core users, those technical resources, project management, resource management, technical architects, probably don't use CRM on a day-to-day basis. Senior management probably do, but probably more from a management information business intelligence perspective rather than day-to-day uses of CRM. So that makes this a very good candidate for implementing some change into it as BPM rather than within the solution. Another example could be invoice approval within ERP systems. We want to introduce some extra functionality here. So this could be about the approval of a received invoice. The invoice is scanned via a scanning solution, and it needs several levels of approval depending on the value. So this is clearly an enterprise-wide process because it reaches out everyone within the business, not just necessarily core ERP users in finance. Those users are not core users. And that functionality, interfacing with scanning solutions, perhaps reaching out to external non-core users, isn't really core functionality to ERP systems. So again, this could be a candidate for implementing functionality as BPM rather than within the ERP system. There's no necessarily right or wrong answers here. This is just, yes, it's a good candidate for BPM. Of course, there will be times when implementing functionality within the ERP system does make sense. And the last one to look at is SharePoint and document approval. Our example process is the review and approval of a commercially sensitive document. This can involve the creation, the review, the approval, and the publishing of the document. Okay. So this possibly involves non-core users. If people need to approve the document, they may not be part of the core set of SharePoint users. If it's a team using SharePoint for their own document creation, then it needs to reach out to other users, possibly not core users. But that's pretty much the only category where we can identify this. So this change, it's a good candidate for either the application or the BPM. So there are certainly cases where you could really implement it equally well in both solutions. So BPM, it's a way that you can enhance the functionality of your Microsoft applications without customizing those applications. There's many benefits to that. We've touched on a few today about allowing non-core users to interact with those systems, not directly with those systems, but through BPM, bringing non-core data into the process, being able to just really extend the capabilities, but without having to necessarily customize those particular products. So this then leads us on to the fifth and final way. This is about delivering controlled change. And I want to talk to you about being able to implement that change, but in a well-structured and governed way. Now, change. We touched on this earlier when we were evaluating the change request that I'd submitted earlier. Types of change. There's different types of change, and it's very important to understand, is it a small enhancement? Is it a major enhancement? Are these bug fixes? Because these will determine how we then deploy the change. The desire. Is it a must-have or just perhaps a nice-to-have? Is it urgent? Is it non-urgent? Subtly different to desire. And what's the impact? Will it have a low impact? Will it have a high impact? Is there risk associated? We need to understand all of these. And we saw these earlier when we were assessing the risk. We saw how we could apply change. So very much controlled change is the 6 steps that I showed you earlier. I won't recap those because we've already been over those. The last step in that chain was to actually deploy the change. We'd made the change, we checked the business were happy with it. So how can we then deploy that change? Let's just very quickly have a look at Sequence Kinetics version management capabilities, just to give you a feel for what's available to us. So from our administration site, we can use version management to control exactly how we deploy this change. And we have a number of options here. I'm on the development environment. I can create a workflow package. I can call this is my hotfix 44 drop. What I'm doing here is actually gathering up the process definitions, all the changes that have been made, into an easily manageable package. And this is then available to me to be able to download this particular, let me save it onto desktop. This then gives me, it's actually a zip file, but this gives me a package that I can then move from my development environment to test and on to production and deploy those changes to those particular environments. And it's as simple as moving a file, whether that's automated or manually controlled by IT. Really up to IT how they can drive that. And then once I've got that, I've got 2 choices about how I then apply that change. I can restore the workflow. This is where we're applying the changes as a hotfix. It will create it will actually overwrite the template that the process is currently running under. So any in-flight processes will adopt those changes. Or if I want to import it as a new version, I simply import it as a duplicated workflow, but within the same workflow space. That will then create it as a new version, and any existing in-flight processes will carry on the previous version. All new instances will adopt the new process, in this case with the new SLA. So with Sequence Kinetics, you can actually have multiple instances of a process running under multiple different versions of the process. very powerful capabilities means that you can apply those changes exactly how the business needs. You're not restricted in the way. So one change may deploy as a hotfix, another change as a version. You've got the ability to be able to control exactly how you deploy your change to the business. Okay. So, delivering change historically requires some downtime. Taking that system down so the change can be applied and the system brought back up again. But really we want to be able to apply changes with minimal or zero disruption to normal operation. And we also want to be able to apply those changes to processes currently underway. Sequence's HotChange technology allows us to control, just as I showed you, how and when we apply change, whether we apply as a hotfix, a new version. So some of the key steps. It's about service development methodology. You may want to apply change using traditional waterfall approach. You may want to break up your functionality into an iterative approach, introduce different changes at different times, review them with the business and so on. So you may want to use Agile or Scrum methodologies. Again, with Sequence HotChange, you can work with both methodologies, even mix and match. So what are the key steps to successful application of change? We need to specify the changes. We need to schedule a change drop when we're going to apply these changes. We need to determine what changes we're going to have in each drop. We need to categorize that drop, how we're actually going to deploy it, what effect it's going to have on existing operations. And we need to implement those changes, test those changes, and then deploy those changes. So the red asterisks here are all items that relate to the collaboration during change. So there is a huge overlap between collaborating during change and actually making the change happen. They really need to happen as one step. Okay. So we've had a look at how we can deploy change. I've given you just a very few pointers again in the time that we've got here about a structured and well-governed approach to actually applying change, made possible using Sequence Kinetics HotChange technology. So change, IT's biggest pain. How can we transform IT's biggest pain into its biggest achievement? It doesn't need to be a pain. With a few simple steps, we can transform its biggest pain into its biggest achievement. Through collaboration during change, by reusing skills that we've already got in the organization, transforming those skills into BPM skills so they can work on BPM projects. Being able to make mobile applications very quickly and easily to enable your workforce to be able to work out and about. We've talked about extending Microsoft applications with BPM. Sometimes we want to customize the applications, sometimes it makes more sense to extend the capability by using BPM to create that functionality. And finally, it's about delivering controls change. Change that is just that escapes is bad change. We need to make sure it's controlled, carefully tested, deployed, and has minimal impact on normal operations. So, final point. Theodore Rubin. The question is not whether we are able to change, but whether we are able to change fast enough. I'd like you to take that one away. And finally, say thank you. We've been through things fairly quickly here, touched lots of items. If you'd like to know more, please feel free to contact us. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening to this webinar, and we hope to see you at future PNMsoft webinars. Thank you.